This is the U Show podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome in to the U Show podcast. I'm Chris Treft. I'm here with Ben Gisselson. Got a good show lined up for you today. Not a USHL alum, not a player who's ever really been associated with the USHL, but now he is in a big way. He's the VP of Hockey Development and Strategic Collaboration. Yeah, say that 10 times fast. From the NHL, Kevin Westgarth. And Ben, he's a guy that, like we said, didn't really have much to do with the league, but since the position he took with the NHL, really about building the game of hockey, especially in the United States. And what better league to do it with than the USHL? So he's had his hands in a lot of things. So it's a great interview, and he's a great person to talk to in terms of all the great initiatives the USHL and the NHL have going forward.
You think about the last 5-10 years, again, long time before you or I, Chris, were involved as we are now in our capacities with the league and different member teams like myself. And you look at the trajectory of the NHL and the USHL and that partnership, you think about the Fall Classic, which has been such a smashing success every year they've had it now. Westgarth gets into that. He gets into how he has been working hand in hand, whether it be with Tom Garrity or Bob Fallon previously, and working to try and connect these two leagues together, because the NHL obviously has a vested interest in the USHL, just like they do in all the other junior leagues that I'm sure Kevin Westgarth is working with as well. But you hear in this interview very candidly what Westgarth's thoughts are on the USHL, and clearly how important the NHL views the connection with the USHL to be.
And him and Evan Rand have a great connection. Evan Rand, obviously, with the USHL. Those two were great together and doing a lot of stuff together. So kudos to Evan for getting Kevin involved, and them having such a great working relationship just bode well for everybody. And, speaking of the NHL, as we're going to talk to Westgarth later on in the show, big announcement from the NHL. The playoff format is set. For all intents and purposes, we're all set to go going forward. Obviously, they have some little kinks to figure out and everything, but still excited to have hockey back. It's going to be in the middle of summer. It's going to be a little weird, but doing the best with what they got. Kudos to the NHL for getting all that going forward.
I was fueled up yesterday watching that and watching Bettman, even though the actual action really wasn't very I wouldn't call it riveting, to say the least. It was just Bettman sitting in his room live streaming to the world. But just, again, like you said, Chris, the idea that hockey is coming. And again, we don't have a date. We don't have cities yet, but that we're close and that they're at least on the cusp of really getting something going here. It looks like maybe July, we're thinking. And look, you look at the scenarios, and there are definitely going to be teams that probably weren't super happy with it, but at the end of the day, who is going to be fully happy with it? It's a very bizarre scenario, and it will be a scenario that hockey fans, players, coaches, staff, everybody in the hockey world alike will remember for a very long time, because it's vastly different than anything that we have grown accustomed to seeing as hockey people. I'm excited about it personally. My wife is a huge Blackhawks fan. I'm a huge Oilers fan. Those two teams are dueling in the, well, I guess kind of the play-in round or the qualifying round, I think they called it. So we're excited to hate each other for a couple of days there. I'll be wearing my orange and she'll be wearing her black and red. So that'll be fun. And another personal standpoint, Minnesota and Vancouver, growing up in Minnesota, that was a huge rivalry back when the Wild were in the old Northwest division with Vancouver. They had some brutal battles in the playoffs. So I'm excited to see those two teams duel again too, from a personal standpoint.
Well, for me, my girlfriend Bailey is from Washington, D.C., and she's a huge Capitals fan. And we always joked, because there's not much rivalry going on there, but we always joke, if the Avs and the Capitals, obviously I grew up a Colorado Avalanche fan. I don't know why I said obviously. I'm from Indiana. It's a long story, but
obviously being Indiana, yeah, of course.
For being an Avs fan,
that was your team.
For being a Capitals fan, we always say if they make it to the finals, we're going no matter what, at least to one game. Like, we're going to figure it out. We might have to sell some stuff like a house or a car to do it, but we're going to do it. And we said this is probably the one year that the Capitals and Avalanche are going to make it to the finals. There's a good chance. Like, it'd be a good matchup, and it's very intriguing at that possibility. But one year we wouldn't even be able to go, so we would just hate each other in the house for a little bit. But it's going to be strange. It's going to be different. What's it going to be like raising the cup with no fans?
No kidding.
Are they going to do the goal horns when they score? Because that's something I care about. I don't know. But I will say this, my one opinion, and I think it might be more difficult to win the Stanley Cup this year than ever before. You have a weird playing round. You have a situation where you have 3 months off and all of a sudden then you have to go straight into playoff hockey. So, yes, you're going to have to put an asterisk next to it because it's different. It's weird. But I wouldn't downgrade the championship to that extent because you're still playing a playoffs of 7-game series. You're still grueling it out. It's still going to be playoff hockey. It's different months, different times, different ways of getting there, more teams. But there's more teams you have to beat. It's going to be almost more difficult with the situation. So whoever wins a Stanley Cup, hopefully it's Colorado, but whoever wins a Stanley Cup, I'll look at it with a lot of validity because I think it's going to be a tough hill to climb to win that Stanley Cup, as it always is. It's not like it's just a random Olympic-style tournament to win the Cup. It's very similar to what you have to do in the past. So kudos to the NHL. I know some people disagree with it. They would just rather have the season cancel and have next year be normal. And, that's got a point too. But either way you look at it, great job by Gary Bettman. Hopefully the boos will be lessened when he hands out the cup in front of fans the next time, because the work he's done to be able to do this so all the players are safe, fans can have hockey, even though it's in the summer. Like what their NHL is doing is very commendable, and we're going to have hockey. It's going to be weird, but some hockey's better than no hockey, to say the least.
I have never understood the boos of Gary Bettman, and maybe it's because I'm not old enough to remember the early years of Gary Bettman. And I know there's been lockouts. I know there's been disputes, but you can't look at where the NHL was when he became the commissioner and where they are now and think he's done a poor job. I don't think there's any way you could spin that, in my opinion. I have a literal memory of when I got to the age of when I could start to actually understand things, where I would always boo on the screen when Bettman was on watching at home. And then I got old enough and I went, wait a second, why are we doing this? Like, what's the reason behind this? So yeah, that was a soapbox moment for me there, but I've never understood that, because sure, he's put the league through some difficult times and some lockouts, but the growth alone is enough for me to think about Gary Bettman fondly whenever the time comes for him to step down, because he will have left the league in a much better place when that time comes for him to step down than he took it when he started.
People always forget he's just the face of the owners. So sometimes he has to go out and say that. They might blame lockouts on him or other things, but he's just the guy that's reporting it. He's just the voice and the face of the owner. So it's not always his decisions. And, some other of the major sports commissioners, maybe they have a case for being booed. They shall not be named. But Gary Bettman, I don't necessarily believe is one of them. But you know what? You have the right to boo. You can do whatever you want. People still – they boo Tyler Bertuzzi in Colorado, thinking it's Todd Bertuzzi, and they're not even related. So I mean,
sports fans,
people just need to boo, right? Boo it all out. Just let it go. But you know what? Someone who has never been booed on his home team, probably a lot on the visiting team, because he's a tough guy, is Kevin Westgarth. He's our interview. It's a good one. So let's get to that. The VP of Hockey Development and Strategic Collaboration for the National Hockey League, Kevin Westgarth. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining us now here on the U Show podcast for our interview. Normally we do USHL alums or people close to the league or have been a part of the league. We're changing things up a little bit, getting a different perspective. Joining us now is the VP of Hockey Development and Strategic Collaboration for the National Hockey League, Kevin Westgarth. Kevin, how are we doing?
I'm not too bad. Glad to be on with you guys.
So obviously a little bit of a strange time going on right now. And so, I mean, you might be in a different situation because we've been talking to players and coaches, and they're obviously kind of bored right now. They're working out, they're buying time, but I'm sure you're still relatively busy with all the responsibilities you have with the league and everything. But what you've been up to and how you killing time during these strange times?
Yeah, it's certainly strange times is right. We're I think all very fortunate to be involved in sport that we are, and have some daylight kind of down the road. Obviously, we're not sure exactly when that day will be, but for me, it's been kind of some things have been put on pause and just like everything else, but then other things you're able to kind of plan and work on some strategy, certainly for next year as well. And a lot of my work with the USHL falls into that bucket. So it's been great. And kind of beyond that, certainly the working remotely from home with a couple little kids under 4, 2 little boys under 4. So it's been a bit of an adjustment. They're certainly keeping my wife and I busy as well. So lots going on, but feel pretty fortunate to be in a situation we're in.
If you look around the NHL league office, you'll see a lot of different paths of how certain people got to those roles in the NHL league office. Yours, like some other of your colleagues, was to play in the NHL and to get there via a little bit of a different path than maybe you might see. Of course, there are others, like I mentioned, that are there with you that are also NHL alumni. So yours was LA Kings, Carolina Hurricanes. You were a cup champion in 2012 with the Kings. And before we really dive into what you're doing now with the league office and your passions and your commitments now, we do want to set the stage for maybe our younger demographic listener who didn't catch the career of Kevin Westgarth. And we've been starting some of these with our more jovial customers that we've had, because we understand you're a very well-liked guy. You've got a very quick wit and a clever sense of humor. So we wanted to start with a little game, break the ice a little bit, get everybody comfortable before we really roll into it. So if you're okay with that, I've got 5 names on a list here that I'm going to read off, and I want you to come up with the first word that comes to mind when I say this person, and you can kind of just word vomit it out there. And again, we can go back and edit, so anything you don't like, if maybe that's the first word that comes to mind, just let us know.
Exactly.
But so without any further ado, here comes the first name of this list of 5 names, if you're ready, Kevin.
Of course. Assuming they're a bunch of guys I like, this should be a cakewalk.
First name, a guy that I do know that you like, George Peros.
George, let's see. I'll double up here. Tough and sharp. I mean, he obviously was a bit of almost kind of created the pathway for me coming out of Princeton as an enforcer. Actually, we both started our pro careers in Manchester, New Hampshire with the Monarchs back then, and I think the only time I ever actually kind of leapfrogged him a little bit, I got a gig at the NHL about 2 months before he did. And then obviously very soon after, about a year, he leapfrogged me by becoming the head of player safety and doing an absolutely fantastic job. He's another guy that has a ton of responsibility. I think wears it well and takes his job really seriously, and I think does a great job at it.
But I'm sure you don't.
But also very funny, and yeah, it's always interesting, given that I think people get surprised that we dropped the gloves with each other, I think 3 or 4 times during our pro career, and I always like to give him crap. Yeah, he was always smart enough to fight pretty defensively against me, but it always worked out okay.
So you might notice a bit of a theme to this list. The next name is Brian Mcgrath.
Mcgrath. Well, he's an animal and a beauty. So, I was fortunate enough to probably much more play with Gratz in Calgary for a little while. Also, fortunately or unfortunately, got to drop the gloves with him a couple times. One time he definitely got the better of me, and so he's just a tough customer. Just a big kid. Respect what he's been able to do with his pathway, and now how he's trying to help other guys through alcoholism or addiction with the Flames and kind of throughout the NHL. But yeah, he really is just a big kid. Like loves to have a good time, and kind of very just a character and a lot of fun to be around.
How about Colton Orr?
Orzy. There you go. Another tough customer, obviously. Have been lucky enough to actually play in a couple charity games with him, being in the New York area. certainly probably has a little better hands than guys would imagine, even with his gloves on. But yeah, another great team guy playing against them for years, and had a couple good tilts against them. So certainly appreciated getting to know both sides of him as a as a competitor on the ice, and then kind of a buddy and a good team guy off the ice.
So I lied to you, Kevin. I'm going to go with 4 names because I want to get to this name more than most. It's the one outlier on my list that I came up with. Bill Cowher.
Well, Bill Cowher he is just an absolute, I would say, beauty, great person, and very fortunate that he is my father-in-law. As I said, actually, I already used this for Gratz, but he's just another kind of big kid. He loves to have a good time, and but I can't think of anybody I could be luckier to have kind of in my life. And my wife and I have been together for 14 years. So like as my career was kicking off from out of college, we were together. So to kind of have her dad as a resource, as a kind of sounding board, and all of the above, kind of as my, I'm on the bubble, kind of working my way through the minors, kind of trying to make it, and then just again being that good team guy throughout my NHL days, and then heading all the way into kind of my my post hockey career. So I'm very fortunate we get along very well. Haven't been on the wrong side of that chin and glare just yet, or at least too many times. So just a really great guy, and somebody I'm very lucky to have in my life.
There's always anxiety when you go to meet your significant other's parents, specifically for men, the father. Was there any added anxiety knowing what you knew about the man that you were going to meet and all he had done in one of the most physical sports on the planet?
Yeah, a couple, I think, I guess a couple little stories around that was pretty fortunate in that I think heading into it, so my wife and I have been together for a few months, and my wife played basketball at Princeton, I played hockey, so we kind of had a couple days off over Christmas, and they said I'd kind of been dating for a few months, but the Steelers were playing in Cleveland around Christmas time when I'd gone home, so I was able to drive down and kind of meet her sisters, meet her mom, and then after the game was going to meet her dad. And very fortunately, the Steelers won 41-0 and mopped the floor with the Browns. But even then, I think that was probably a little bit of an obnoxious, I think I was maybe a junior at that time, but obnoxious kind of college athlete trying to just be confident. That was kind of holding true until about 5 minutes before, where the kind of reality of meeting both my girlfriend's dad, and then also the fact that it's probably one of the more intimidating faces that's ever been on TV, and he just comes storming out with a big smile on his face, and it's oh my, what a great game, and so the first meeting couldn't have gone any better. I dare say I'd hate to imagine what would have happened if they'd gotten beaten 41-0, but I guess it was all meant to be.
Indeed, it must have been. You go to Princeton to play hockey, meet your then wife at Princeton. I'm curious, Kevin, looking at your pedigree and what's known about you as an enforcer. You're an Ontario-born kid at the time. Almost a prototypical route for someone like you, again, just looking at it from a hockey playing perspective, would be the OHL, would be CHL. But you go to Princeton instead. You take the college route. In your mind, what were you weighing there? Was there ever a thought about the CHL, or was it college all the way for you?
Yeah, I'd say I think as you said, it is very interesting. A kid that grows up in, be it Ontario or Red Deer, Alberta, or Chicoutimi, like who ends up in major junior is certainly a little different than I dare say some of the Americans, particularly that come from a little further out or with kind of more traditional college lineage. But personally, on a couple fronts, it was good for me in that, I wasn't very good when I was kind of 16, 17, and everybody else's careers were kind of taking off. Actually, when I was 16, I think I was playing basically like A or even like B level travel hockey in Amherstburg, Ontario. Played like kind of high school for General Amherst. And so it was kind of not like it was even in the cards. And for me at that time, kind of grew soon after that. But kind of all that being said, my parents were veterinarians, like education, kind of just that pathway was always the path through college was always a lot more enticing for my family and I, my brother as well, who was a year ahead of me in school. So it really, I ended up playing what was junior B in southwestern Ontario for the Chatham Junior Maroons to maintain my eligibility, and kind of things went pretty well from there. I basically, went from that travel hockey to, I would say, growing 6 or 7 inches over the summer helped, and kind of starting to establish a little bit of a physical role in Chatham, but then also saw the value of going to college and being able to kind of get the education, but kind of work on my skills, skating, everything else that makes you a complete hockey player. So it really was the perfect route for myself. And I wouldn't change a thing about it. Was very, again, lucky. My brother had actually gone to Princeton the year before me. And throughout our careers there, he actually took a year off. So we ended up graduating the same year in 2007. So that was even beyond kind of education, hockey, like the fact that I was able to play 3 years of D1 college hockey with my brother was pretty special, and something that, I hold pretty dearly.
And Kevin, I'd imagine you mentioned some of those guys at 16, 17 whose careers were taking off then probably didn't get to do what you got to do in 2012 with the LA Kings, Stanley Cup champion. But where I want to really kick this off now is after that fantastic playing accomplishment, you wind up in Carolina the next season where you become the NHLPA rep for the Hurricanes to work on the collective bargaining agreement at the time. Was that, do you feel, your first real step towards what you're doing now when you became the NHLPA rep there?
Yeah, I would say certainly on a number of standpoints. Actually, doing the same thing in LA, kind of after we won the Cup, was the soon-to-be expiring collective bargaining agreement, and given that I'd been involved and from a number of standpoints, wanted to, certainly represent my teammates. Kind of felt like I did that on the ice, so kind of wanted to do it off the ice as well. Fight for kind of what they wanted, what they were there for. It was a great opportunity to kind of learn, dive into essentially the business of hockey. And at the end of the day, you're going to meet all the Players Association leadership. Don Fear had come on a couple of years before that. Very much respected Don and a lot of the folks that he had surrounded himself with. And then also the NHL leadership and Commissioner Bettman, Deputy Commissioner Daly, and NHL owners and guys that have a lot of sway in the game. So I didn't really see any downside to it. So and it was definitely frustrating and kind of an education you can't put a price tag on, because it was something else going through the work stoppage and collective bargaining and seeing how this thing played out, and but essentially comported with myself with I hope with pretty good respect of everybody. Understood that nobody is evil in this situation, even though some pretty crappy things kind of happened with no hockey and a lot of people, hockey players, otherwise, staff, like arena staffs, etc., out of work when there's no hockey going on. But everybody's just working to get the kind of best deal they can. And, if you kind of go through that process with respect and, certainly fight for what you think is right, what you believe you deserve and are able to get, that respect really went a long way, and was able to develop a pretty good relationship with the deputy commissioner, Bill Daly. And kind of as my career was coming to an end years later, we had stayed in touch, and I kind of asked the question after talking to a few folks at the Players Association as well, and just started kind of doing, I guess, due diligence as to what would be out there as a gig. Very fortunate that a job at the NHL was available, and they kind of put something together and told me to kind of figure it out. So I spent the last 4.5 years or so figuring it out, and very fortunately, I get to work with the USHL quite a bit. So it's been a great ride.
Last question before we dive into the USHL, because there's plenty to talk about with that, and we're excited to talk about it. For players that played at the level you played at, there are guys and gals that will say that sports is a release. You got the stresses of life, and you can get out on the ice, in your example, and the stresses of your day-to-day everywhere else go away. Have you found out of the game something that can, I don't know if it's replace it, but have you found a way to get that release that, and as a former athlete myself, I can speak to it a little bit, and Chris can as well. If you have you found that release? What is it? Or maybe you never had it. I'm just curious to ask that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. I mean, again, mixing in this very strange time with the sports league closed down. I mean, obviously that's a very small piece of a huge issue that's confronting the world right now. It's like I wake up and shake my head. It's incredibly surreal every day, but it is incredible to have that loss and to be kind of more limited in what you can do physically and socially. And I do think that sports is very representational of kind of that, both kind of community for, fandom, personally, and kind of for anybody who's, picked up a ball glove, picked up a basketball, or certainly laced up a pair of skates. I think there is a huge opportunity to just kind of get away from it, be in the moment. There's a whole lot of mindfulness that goes along with it. Once you kind of put your gear on, it's like you're not checking your phone. You're not thinking about, whatever project you maybe should be following up on that day, that night, whatever. You get an hour or two at the rink to just be a hockey player, to, get a good sweat in, to hopefully score a few goals. And I really do think there is a huge benefit to, having that time. And I think sports provides a lot of that for a lot of people. And again, the community, after getting out of the game and retiring, you very rarely hear guys talk about missing the paycheck. Although it would be nice, it's definitely much more around, the locker room. I've been I have a few buddies that have stayed in touch with from a number of teams. Actually, a nice Zoom conference like everybody's doing these days, with a handful of guys I played with on the Kings, and just had a couple beers, and I don't think we talked about 10 seconds of a whole lot of meaningful stuff, but just all those dumb jokes and kind of idiocy came back, and it really is I think just mentally, spiritually, a pretty special thing.
The United States Hockey League. What did you know about it before you started dealing directly with the league? Now you working in the NHL league office, and what was your first foray? What was maybe the first project that you jumped in on with in conjunction with the USHL?
Yeah, let's see. I'd say growing up before, so God, I was playing juniors. Kind of scary now, but let's call it 16 years ago or so. certainly wasn't a huge thing. I grew up near Windsor, Ontario, in Amherstburg, kind of out in the county around the big city, the metropolis of Windsor, Ontario. So pretty southern, like just actually south of Detroit, which tends to blow people's minds, in Canada. Didn't know a lot about the USHL at that point, but by the time I went to Princeton, played with a few guys who went through the USHL, and had an understanding that it was just kind of a kind of premier junior league in North America, like so many others. And I've really come to have a huge appreciation for it, for the spot that it holds in certainly American hockey development, and just the pathway for U.S. players, obviously usually right to college. And when I started working with the league, and I'd say the first foray into kind of understanding more was part of this, Pat LaFontaine began this hockey development summit. It was called, talking about a ton of different, basically bringing together a lot of the leaders from hockey, and to talk about how we can essentially improve youth hockey and structurally improve the pathway for kids, the experience for kids and their families. And yeah, at the time, Bob Fallon was a commissioner, and got to know him pretty well, and kind of started a couple projects looking at them, and they were working on some development agreements, or a development agreement kind of with USA Hockey and the NHL. And obviously it's such an important path for our league now, kind of to the top level, that it was kind of key that we kind of lend them some support, both kind of business-wise, but also financially particularly, and then hockey operationally. So seeing that kind of being built a few years ago, and knowing that, again, my boss, the deputy commissioner, oversees that. So it's oversees a relationship with the USHL, and basically just seeing that between the USHL and a number of the other leagues that he works with, a lot of opportunity to kind of just lend a hand and providing another set of eyes and hands, to make sure that we're, helping each other out as much as we can. So hence that I dare say mouthful, if not mouthful of word vomit, that my title is Hockey Development and Strategic Collaboration. So try to collaborate strategically and develop hockey.
Well, one of the big initiatives that the NHL has been a massive part of, on a list of many with the USHL, has been the Fall Classic out in Pittsburgh. I showed up there as a broadcaster for the Des Moines Buccaneers 3 seasons ago now, in 2017. As a player, I played in the North American Hockey League at a time where there wasn't as many pro scouts in the stands as there are now, and the USHL definitely brings a lot more pro scouts in the building than the NA does. But so I was walking in with that as my background, and I walked in to the UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex and saw the game ahead of us, and I'm not sure if I saw a single non-scout in the building, and there wasn't an empty seat. I was floored by that. I was floored. I could not believe it. Yeah. I took a picture. I sent it to all my buddies and said, so this is what the USHL looks like. But I mean, what an incredible event it has been. And I know for a fact the players that on the way to that trip, there's some nerves, because they know full and well that that is an opportunity for them to set their stage for the future. Talk more about the Fall Classic and how the NHL has been instrumental in that, because I know as a USHL staffer and talking to the other staffers like Chris, like Brent Meskey, how important and integral that is for the USHL on a year-to-year basis.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And so the Fall Classic began before kind of my tenure. I was coming on board or kind of coming into the mix right when they were becoming league games. So really kind of upping the ante for those players. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, adding to those nerves. But it's an incredible event, the amount of orchestration that goes into it. kind of starting with Dan Marr and his central scouting group, helping the NHL scouts, probably lending a hand for a lot of the college scouts and on down the line. Because not only is the USHL games happening, they have a bunch of the kind of youth, U15, U16, etc. Tournaments going on at the same time around Pittsburgh. And really have to give a great shout out, well, to the USHL staff, from Tom and Evan, Denny, as you said, Brent, and Luke, kind of on down through everybody, and definitely Rich Hicks and his group with the Penguins. It's quite an impressive feat, the amount of kind of volunteers and people that they get together to put on what is really like a massive and premier event. And you are absolutely right about the scouts. I've always kind of chuckled that either it is full of scouts or they hand out kind of black or navy jackets with clipboards when every fan walks in. It is a strange uniform to see completely decked out in the stands for sure.
Well, the scouts have that particular look, just like everybody else does. All the kids are wearing the same stuff, and all the scouts, you got group, you got to look the same, right?
Absolutely. Well, I did chuckle that again. Another big event that kind of we help support, along with USA Hockey, and John Van Beesbrook's been great with this year. Actually, Dan Marr and Beezer were kind of instrumental in kind of adjusting the top prospects game to combine it with the USA Hockey All-American game, and basically mixing together both the top guys on the NTDP and the top kind of other players in the USHL this year in Plymouth. And similarly, it was like, wow, a lot of people brought their dark jackets, their clipboards. They seem really into it.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to know each other. It's kind of weird that all these fans came together tonight. Are really, really into watching these guys play.
So hockey, a few seasons back, created the Declaration of Principles. And so that's something where, from the NHL on down, all the leagues are getting involved to try to create a safe and positive environment for everyone. And that includes a lot of the stuff you're doing. That includes a lot of the stuff that you oversee, the USHL does, and these initiatives that, we have talked about and we're going to talk about. What can you tell us about that Declaration of Principles and how important it is to not only the game of hockey, but the USHL and the NHL?
Absolutely. And actually, I'll loop back to kind of give credit to Pat LaFontaine. This really was his brainchild, kind of came out of a lot of that work with, again, kind of creating a summit opportunity for, again, leaders across the junior leagues, but through college, professional, and the NGBs like USA Hockey and Hockey Canada, all coming together to kind of talk about this. And that was one of the takeaways and concrete steps we were able to take, is putting together kind of these hockey principles that are very much aspirational. I think this is something that when you go through it, and certainly me reading it, I want to believe that every person in North America, if not the world, has had this experience with hockey, where it's about creating respect and being treated with respect, focusing not on kind of wins and losses all the time, but the life skills and values and character building that you get out of hockey on down the line through valuing on and off the ice hockey, multi-sport participation. So it's not super prescriptive, but certainly has some things that I would say that the leaders of hockey believe. But it is certainly difficult. It is aspirational. It's somewhere we want to get to, because it's definitely true that every person hasn't had that experience. Everybody is not able to have that experience, and we all have to be diligent and continue to work towards achieving the principles. And it's definitely something I take a lot of pride in in doing. As I said, I think before the call, I got a couple little boys, a 4-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, who I hope one day to get full boat into our game, and I really hope that it is a positive experience for them, and something that they'll take away and want to give back to whenever their career is over, whether that's at 15, after high school, after college, or playing the beer league. That's actually one of my favorite quotes. I think number 99, former NHL player named Wayne Gretzky, I believe, said it. And if not, I'll credit him anyway. He deserves it. Everybody ends up in the beer league. So no matter how good you are, one day you're going to be playing beer league hockey. So having that kind of as a background, and that's something you still want to do whenever your kind of competitive playing days are done, that means the game did right by you, and hopefully you end up doing right by the game.
And some of those people play beer league a little better than others. Yeah.
That is definitely true, although I don't even want to begin my own evaluation at this point.
I was going to say, I shudder to think about what Wayne Gretzky's beer league team must have or still looks like. I mean, oh boy, that most people would sink pretty quickly, I'd imagine, at the pace of that play, whatever league he's playing in.
Well, he's got the fantasy camp he does every year.
True.
That's
Yeah,
right.
So he's still probably dominates.
There you go. We should go check it out.
Yeah.
There you
So,
go. That actually might be.
You're the only one that might be able to keep up, though.
I don't know about anymore.
With these declarations, one of the big emphases that, I don't know if you want to call it at the forefront of it, I think the NHL and hockey is putting enough weight into all the different categories, but obviously the mental health side of the game has been something publicly that hockey has tried to rally behind because it's a major concern with the game. Concussion protocol. We've seen all the different things that have been starting to work into hockey at every level over the last 10, 15 seasons now. And one thing that you were a big proponent of in connection with the USHL was connecting the USHL with Headversity. And we don't need to go too in depth on it right now because we're actually going to be having Dr. Ryan Todd with Headversity on this podcast later on down the road.
Very nice.
But from your perspective, let's talk about the mental health side of the game and why Headversity is such a great option for our players to have in our game.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say kind of personally, seeing for one thing, actually, I in college went through pre-med program, was a psychology major, so maybe I was kind of already primed to see the world this way a little more. But then going through my professional career, everything is connected, everything else. I would say, actually, that's one of the things our commissioner, Gary, loves to say, which is very true. I do end up liking to separate a little bit out the kind of head injury versus kind of mental resilience or mental or just wellness side, but obviously they're all very connected. And certainly for me, when I was playing, to see the awareness around head injuries and concussion shift so drastically from when I started pro in 2007, especially entering pro hockey as an enforcer. It was kind of like, try not to get a concussion, but you really don't want to break your hand or your orbital because that's a real injury. And then very quickly, I think the appreciation for the impact of head injuries and how much more we need to pay attention to them, how obviously they are real injuries, even though we don't see them the same way we see a torn ACL or a torn meniscus. That was, I'd say, a big part of why I was drawn to it so much, was just an understanding of also not just the injury portion of it, but kind of the day-to-day ups and downs, and seeing that, knowing that there were guys post-hockey careers that struggled. I would say often not more or less in kind of the general population, but because we have more ability and control over helping them, it was incumbent upon us to try. And really this step with Adversity at the USHL level is both utilizing the technology we have now with everybody with phones in their pockets, to deliver kind of short, quick bites, much of kind of resilience training across a number of different kind of mental health and wellness areas, that guys, again, can just kind of check in on their phone for a few minutes at a time, do a little gamified kind of learning, and really just try to make them a little more self-aware, and a little more in tune with how they're feeling, how they're doing, if they, get to that place where they need help, but really just learning how to deal with kind of everyday stressors and being a lot better at kind of managing that, even on their own, with certainly opportunities to reach out for extra help if they need to. And that was, I think, something of a eureka. I think over the years that I've been talking to Dr. Todd and his group, was something I think that was, had kind of, we helped shepherd each other, understanding how guys learn, how guys are going to digest things. And they've really gotten to a really good spot where it's being used quite a bit. I've actually been shocked, and I absolutely am in awe of kind of this generation of player in the USHL right now, because younger folks, these Gen Z folks that are much more used to being on their phone, and they're much more used to, I think, absorbing kind of important things through technology. And this has really borne that out. Like, the usage has been incredible, like the number of kids that use it, and a lot of the teams we've really seen kind of rally around it. And unfortunately, our kind of prize for the team that use it the most is postponed, like everything else. But we're going to get Teddy Purcell, who's now working with Adam Oates and his kind of hockey and skill development, but also has like a kind of cerebral component of training. We're going to get Teddy to the winning team, which I don't believe has been announced yet, which we'll probably try to do in the fall. But just to come and kind of spend a day with the club and grab dinner here, share a few stories, I'm sure, each way. And Teddy had a great career in the USHL, a great career in the NHL, and is a pretty funny and wonderful Newfoundlander. So very much look forward to that. But really, that's all secondary to, I think, how much help that can give guys to just manage the ups and downs of a season, and not only and equip them, for the rest of their lives, ideally, to be able to manage those ups and downs. So it is something I'm very proud of, and I think the USHL and Evan Rand and Tom Garrity, Denny, have done a great job kind of continually reinforcing its importance, and appreciate the coaches, GMs, owners, everybody buying into it, and it's been wonderful.
So staying on that same topic, as you mentioned, there's a separation between the mental health and the actual injury of concussions. But the USHL started working with Dr. Zarnota, who's the consulting neuropsychologist for the league. And the USHL is kind of stepping forward and getting ahead of the game here in their concussion protocol. And it's the concussion protocol that has been created has been based off of Dr. Zarnota's information. So what can you tell us about that and how important that is, especially from taking a developmental league like the USHL and really getting to the forefront of these concussion protocols and trying to be as close to the NHL as possible?
Yeah, and I'll kind of extend that out to saying that Evan Rand at the USHL office has also been hugely important in kind of pushing this along, basically taking a lot of the NHL's concussion protocols and kind of best practices, and we were able to connect around kind of making sure it lined up with our the chair of our concussion subcommittee, and then working through it even further with Dr. Zarnota. So it really has been a big year, I would say, kind of just, really making sure you're the gold standard, because it is important. And I think that is something we've all learned, and certainly me personally, both, again, for myself having a couple concussions, but having friends that had concussions and then came back too early before they were recovered, and then really put themselves into trouble because they got dinged again and, were laid up for months and months. So I think those building in plans for both kind of the initial recovery and observation and then return to play properly is really critical, and alleviating a lot of the longer term injury issues. And I would say for as much as we know, it's like an iceberg. I think there's 10 times as much that we still do not know about head injuries, and I think the most important thing we can do is kind of digest and accept kind of the best knowledge that we have every day, every year, and that's really what we're trying to do: make sure that these kids are safe and will be as healthy as possible.
Another important initiative we can touch on is the College Hockey Inc. education consultant, and Sean Hogan, who's the director of education there. Obviously, the importance and stress the importance of education and getting these kids ready, as you attended, not only a good college, but a very prestigious college in Princeton, but making sure that these kids, stay current with NCAA policies and make sure they know the benefits of the NCAA hockey route, for their future and things like that, and ensure the eligibility steps and everything. So that's another great initiative that you're involved in. Can you touch on that and tell us not only what goes into that, but how important it is to, USA Hockey?
Absolutely. Yeah. Princeton, I mean, basically the Iowa State of Central New Jersey. So, so we called it, I think. I'd say obviously the USHL, like we spoke about earlier, is like how important it is for that development pathway. And again, delivering kids into that continued hockey development in D1 college, but also through their education, and making sure that as the USHL has grown with, the number of just kids coming from different spots, be it Canada or Europe, there's a lot of Finns, Swedes, Russians, Czechs, etc. coming into the league, that everybody has kind of the right schooling, kind of all their ducks in a row to make sure that they're eligible and able to take advantage of that opportunity of not just playing the USHL, but obviously being able to make that jump to Division I NCAA hockey. So, again, I think just another great resource that we've been able to put together to just make sure that, guys aren't kind of left out in the cold because of some preventable issue with either their school or something that we didn't see coming. So it is really just making sure everybody gets the opportunities they deserve.
I know we've touched on a lot of stuff here, and we don't want to take away too much of playtime with your little ones, but we've touched on a lot of stuff. But is there anything else that you feel is important, or any initiatives that we might not have gotten to that you really think is going to help with the progression of not only USA Hockey, but USHL and the National Hockey League?
Yeah, I'd say, obviously you guys have done your homework, and it is, it's been pretty cool to see the way that we've been able to build this partnership and kind of utilize the funds to help the players on their path to the NHL, but also help their experiences, help their kind of development as people off the ice as well. I mean, we have an online tutoring program to help guys if they are having trouble with school. But beyond that, for coaches and trainers, I'm kind of very excited about some of the development that we're putting in place for them. Again, a lot of it around coaches clinics, and for the trainers around PHATS, which is a kind of trainers conference, and similarly best practice, and really just putting the tools, resources, education available to kind of all levels of the USHL, be it staff, coaching, support staff, even though that really is a lot of the foundation of our game is kind of those trainers, athletic trainers and kind of equipment trainers, and the players. So there is a ton going on. I'm, thrilled to be a part of it. And, I very much look forward to where we'll be once we get back on the ice, hopefully come September, and got our fingers crossed, and we'll kind of play this day by day, but we'll definitely have a lot of things in store for next season.
Kevin, before you go too far down the road on celebrating us for our homework, both Chris and I would definitely be untruthful if we didn't say that Evan Rand and Brent Meskey were a big part of making sure we had all of our ducks in a row here for this one. You can't necessarily just go you can't go Wikipedia what the USHL and the NHL have been talking about like we can do for everybody else that we have to interview. So we have to give credit where credit's due, right?
Well, there you go. Just like they make me look good, they're making you guys look good today too. So I don't mind that one bit.
Yeah, they're the real heroes here.
Yeah, they are. Well, this has been a treat, Kevin. Anything else before we wrap it up here? Can't thank you enough, and looking forward to seeing what the USHL and the league, the big league, the NHL, will do together here in the coming future. Obviously, once we all hope we get the skates laced back up, hopefully sooner than later.
Absolutely, yeah, and I hope you guys stay well in the middle of the country there, and really appreciate getting on and kind of being able to lay out a bunch of the stuff we're talking about. And, look forward to seeing how great we can make the USHL.
Well, thanks a ton, Kevin. We appreciate it.
All right, much appreciated. Have a good one.
You too. Be well.
Huge thanks to Kevin Westgarth for joining us for the U Show podcast. And as you heard there, I mean, he's a hardworking guy, a lot of stuff going on between the NHL and the USHL. And as we mentioned, there's some stuff that we had to leave off, right, that we couldn't even mention because there's so much stuff going on. The relationship the NHL and the USHL has is incredible. And I can't even fathom how much stuff that guy has going on, especially with little ones at home. So what him and Evan Rand do to work together amongst the two leagues is great, and glad you guys got to hear it from not only him, but a good perspective as well, just him being a charismatic guy.
For me, I've always been curious about the transition of players into their second job, right? All these guys like Westgarth, guys that have established themselves and have had longer than normal NHL careers. That's all you know for 25 years, 35 years, whatever it is, however long it is until you officially hang up the skates. So I'm always curious, and I always have time for guys to talk about how they segue out of it, whether it's getting back into hockey at a coaching level or a general manager level, or like Kevin has done, like George Peros we talked about has done, getting into the front office side in the league. And so that part for me was really fun to listen to and to hear his story. And then, of course, like you mentioned, Chris, the connection with the USHL, and he's a big reason why the league that we work in is as close to the league that he works in. And obviously, they've got a lot more on their minds about how they're going to continue to make that partnership even tighter and even closer as we move forward. And I'd imagine some of that stuff is probably a little bit on a standstill right now with what we're going through. But, between them and as well as obviously USA Hockey, that's been a big part of that triad relationship. There's a lot of great things that Westgarth and company have in store for this league and USA Hockey as a whole.
Yeah, you can't count out USA Hockey because it starts from younger kids growing the sport. So the USHL is even better when they get there, and then NCAA, and then to the National Hockey League, hopefully. So thanks to everybody, and thanks to Evan Rand for help setting that up. It was an easy email to send, or probably even a text, with the relationship those guys have. So maybe not much work to be done there, but we still want to give a shout out to Evan. He did have to put a big list together of stuff that they do and what to cover and what not to cover. So that was still pretty hectic. So thanks to everybody involved for this excellent episode and interview with Kevin.
I would end it with a shout out. I don't know if he'll listen or not, but we talked about USA Hockey and their head of communications as of a few months now. Aaron Westendorf was the head of the league media when I got into the league. A terrific guy, a terrific media coordinator when he was in the USHL, and I think he got out of hockey and then stepped right back into it at a big time role with USA Hockey. He'll do a great job there, and hopefully he listens. If not, it's falling on deaf ears, but I'd imagine we have listeners who knows Aaron and all the work he's done in his past. So USA Hockey is in good hands in the communication department with Aaron.
Well, that's all we got for us here at the U Show Podcast. For Ben Gisselson and Kevin Westgarth, I'm Chris Treft, and this was the U Show Podcast.
This is the U Show Podcast.